Hello, I am Mrs. Fawbush and I teach fourth grade here at Woodland, and I will be reading chapter 6 titled Bear Facts. Journal time has come and gone. We've all gathered together to listen to Mr. Mack lecture us about what he calls, with a little insincere laugh, the bear facts. His voice is monotonous, but I'm listening close, making sure he has his facts right. There was a time, he says, consulting the magazine he holds in his hand, when Ursus americanus, the American black bear, was almost gone from this land. Here in the Northeast, 200 years ago, almost all of the forests where bears lived had been cut and turned into farmland. Not only that, bounties were being paid on such large carnivores as bears, wolves, and mountain lions. I have to nod my head at that. It's true. In the early 1800s, they were paying $5 a head for bear scalps, which was big money back then. There was a war on bears. It wasn't just that those animals sometimes killed livestock. People were afraid of them. All kinds of grisly stories were told about humans being killed by wild animals or saved from them at the very last minute by a hunter who was just in time to shoot the bear or wolf or mountain lion as it was about to pounce on some innocent person. Kind of like that woodsman who rescues Little Red Riding Hood from the evil wolf. In point of fact, though, it was those big animals that had to be afraid. For every wolf or bear or mountain lion that even looked at a human being, thousands were killed. There's nothing more dangerous than humans. In all of the North American continent, Mr. Mack continues, turning a page, over the last 100 years, only 52 humans have been killed by black bears. Most of them people foolish enough to get in between a mother bear and her cubs, or unlucky enough to come upon a bear that had broken into a camp for food. What a bear does then is try to get away. And if you are between that bear and the door, you'll be moved aside by that frightened but potentially lethal Bruin. Today, the bears have returned. Slim as it may be, there's always the chance of a dangerous bear encounter when you are in the northeastern forests nowadays. In the Northeast, from Maine through Pennsylvania, it's been estimated that there are now as many as 50,000 wild bears. It's a canned lecture. I know all of those facts, even though they're new to most of the other kids with me. Some of the kids in our group had begun voicing their fears about running into a bear, even before they got off the bus here at Camp Chuckamuck. Or maybe fears is not a strong enough word. Try near hysteria. It seems that even though I was the only one who stayed in my cabin during the journal time an hour ago, none of the other kids ventured into the woods at all. It was starting to get dark, so they all just hung around within sight of each other in the main camp building. And when someone, and wouldn't you know, it had to be Willie Donner, saw something fairly big and black walking around behind the main cabin, he raised the alarm in that stentorian voice of his. People started screaming, boys as well as girls, I might add, and running. Bear, bear, it's after me. Help, a bear is chasing us. Those terrified shouts had brought me outside just as fast as everyone ran for shelter. A real bear? Cool. I was actually hoping to see it. Instead, I arrived on the scene just in time for the camp cook's rotund black Labrador retriever to waddle up to me and lick my face. Apparently, my classmates' reaction to wild bears is par for the course, especially after newly arriving campers see the warnings posted in every building about what to do if you see a bear. This lecture Mr. Mack is giving was originally supposed to be part of the orientation talk after dinner. He lifts up the magazine he's been getting his facts from. It says, he reads, that for every person killed by a black bear, 45 are killed by dogs, 249 by lightning, and 60,000 by fellow human beings. He looks up and gives us a big, insincere grin. See, nothing to worry about. It says that black bears are actually very shy. If you see a bear in the wild, don't run. Just back away from it quietly, or shout and stomp your feet. He closes the magazine and looks around at the still worried faces of most of my classmates. So do I. I can't believe it. Am I the only one who's not a chicken? Even Asa and his crew, who've always tried to make everyone think they are so fearless, were quaking in their boots at the sight of a chubby canine. Some of them would probably still have been trying to crawl under the tables if I hadn't called out, Hey guys, it's just a dog. I reach down and pat Poboy, the dog curled up at my feet, on his broad head. Poboy, he's the black Labrador that started the mass panic and now seems to have adopted me as a new friend. With the blessing of his owners, Mrs. Osgood, the woman in the flowered dress I'd seen on the porch when we arrived, had quickly figured out what was happening. She came right out to claim her dog when she heard the screams for help. We had struck up a conversation while I was petting her dog, and the counselors were rounding up the rest of our group, who had scattered like a flock of hens fleeing from a fox, taking refuge in the main hall, the bunkhouses, the latrines, and an ACES case on top of the bus. I learned two things about Mrs. Osgood right away. One, that she and her husband were Indians themselves, Abenaki. The second was that punctuation meant nothing once she started a sentence. Nice to see that you've taken a shine to our dog. Our boy, Fred, was like that when he was your age and your size, though he's all grown up and gone away. And I was just thinking of him today when I was airing out to give to the Salvation Army some of his old clothes you might have seen on the line back of our cabin, where there's just the three of us now, me and George and Poboy, our dog here. And I named him that because there was this one poem I always liked called The Raven, which was about a black bird. And seeing as how Labradors is often raven black, and the man what wrote the poem was named Poe, and that Poboy is a male dog. You get the picture. The only thing that stopped her flow of words was the arrival of her husband. I liked Mr. Osgood as soon as I saw him. He was as thin as his wife was round. He had that tough, weathered look that some Mohawk elders have, like he was made of sinew and leather. He wasn't dressed in modern clothing, but wore red and black wool pants held up by suspenders and a work shirt with a similarly patterned wool coat over the top. In those clothes, he looked like a lumberjack or an old-time guide, a little like my Uncle Jules, in fact. Uncle Jules always favors clothes made of natural materials like wool and cotton. Even when they're wet, he says they keep you warm, not like these new space-age fabrics. Mr. Osgood's long gray hair came down to the shoulders of that old wool coat. It framed a narrow face, seamed with smile lines. In his left hand, he was holding a stick connected by a string to an old cast iron frying pan he held in his right hand. George, Mrs. Osgood said, put down the bear pan and come meet these two nice boys, Baron and his friend Cody, who have made friends with our Poboy. And any bear come into camp, Mr. Osgood said, they just hightail it for the hills when we bang on this bear pan, even faster than your fellow campers done when they thought a bear was after him. Mr. Osgood looked down at me with a twinkle in his eyes. Aren't you afeard of bears, young fella? No, sir, I said. I'd like to see one. Mr. Osgood nodded, a pleased look on his face. Some spare time, I ought to take you and your friend here up to the bear seat. I look over at Cody, who is sitting on the other side of the fire during Mr. Mack's speech. I have to give him credit. Although at first he ran inside the boys' cabin, he was also the only one who came back and stood next to the door to try to guard it, with a broom that he picked up no less, just in case that black beast tried to follow them in. As a result, he saw that the supposed bear was nothing but a dog and came over to join me petting Poboy. Cody senses my eyes on him. He looks my way and actually smiles. He's still a little embarrassed at having been spooked, but is able to see the humor in the way he and everyone else acted. My mom always told me you can trust folks who know how to laugh at themselves. Cody's smile encourages me and I relax. Maybe too much. Any questions? Mr. Mack says. I raise my hand. It's as if there is another part of me taking over and I'm not really sure what it is about to say. And what is worse, I can't seem to stop it from happening. It's like when a stone breaks loose from a hillside and starts to roll. Nothing is going to halt it until it hits the bottom. Yes, Baron, I say. My family is Mohawk. I grew up hearing stories about black bears. None of our people were ever afraid of real bears. We even have a story about how a mother bear took in an orphan boy and cared for him like she was one of her cubs. Why am I saying this? Is it something in the air here? After a year of semi-successfully allowing my Indian ancestry to fade into the background, I have just blown my cover big time. Clam up, dummy, I tell myself. I managed to snap my mouth shut before I babble out anything else that might be used against me later. It's probably too late. I can already imagine Asa war whooping at me and his buddies sarcastically calling me Little Bear. Mr. Mack is smiling even broader, but his eyes don't look happy. I get the feeling he's not that pleased that I spoke up. Baron, thank you. How wonderful. I'd love to hear that story. He looks around the circle, and I am sure that everyone else here feels exactly the same. An authentic Native American traditional tale. Perhaps we can convince you to share it with us around the campfire one of these evenings. Or perhaps you could convince me to shoot myself right now, I think. There's no way it can get worse than this.